Atomic gigantification was a sweeping Japan nation when along came a dude with an ultra attitude, a common rider who's the greatest kicker of Japan. And of all, man, life's too short now, baby, to not talk big now, baby.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Kaiju Conversation Live. I'm your host, Elijah, and joining me for the first time since his retirement, I'm very honored to bring on Henry. How are you today, Henry?
I'm back, because technically this is not the first time you and I have collaborated. We did the episode for your show, and then you came on for the Green Slime on my show. The good old days. Back when podcasting was all the trend because no one could go to work.
That's so true. Now, funny story about that. So you came on episode 21 of Kaiju Conversation, Curse of the Demon, right?
Yep.
This is episode 12 of Kaiju Conversation Live.
Ooh, spooky. I like that. Oh, I'm all about that. Oh, I'm all about reverse numbers. I just had a moment. I just learned about like the fact that someone and I have like weird number birthdays, and I'm all about weird numbers. I love that. Oh, I'm excited. Exciting.
So, welcome to the show, Kaiju Conversation Live. Before we get too far into it, I have a tiny moment of housekeeping. For all 12, I guess 11 episodes plus 2 specials of the show, we've came on. And this has been the typical look you see for these streams. But I am proud to reveal a new overlay, as you can see now on your screen, where you have some more stuff for the stream. So I'm happy to have that. And with that, we can get moving on our actual discussion.
Yeah. So a lot of things have been happening. It Came From a Monster movie ended in last year actually, oddly enough, around this time last year was the last episode, technically, of It Came From a Monster movie. The last episode was Lily and I doing a commentary track for the original 1954 Godzilla. The last official episode, which was the last official episode, the last mainline episode was a movie called Dave Made a Maze, which I did with like Xenofauna and a few other really great people. Great movie. Have you ever seen that film?
I have not. It sounds... I might have heard of it.
It's a movie about a guy who makes a maze out of cardboard, and there's a cardboard minotaur in it, and it's a great movie if you're a creator. Like, I highly recommend watching it. I think it got an A+ on the show. The very rare A+ film. Actually, no, it got an A, but it was still great because it was better than the movie we did beforehand, which was After Earth, which was awful.
Helmy's in the chat. Hi, Helmy. And Helmy has seen Dave Made a Maze, and he loves it and really, really enjoyed it.
Oh, right. I forget that I can look at the comments in that. I had it on the private chat. It's fine. Seeing how the sausage get made. But yeah, no, it's good to be back. It's fun to be out of retirement. Well, not out of retirement. I'm still retired, but like I'm starting to get more involved in stuff. So like being on your show in June, for those who are watching or tuning in after the live stream, there is an event called Kaiju Brooklyn, which I'm volunteering for. And I'm also getting recognized as the person who coined Doug, or better known to the community as Titanus Doug, because I made a dumb tweet on April Fool's and everybody loved it. And I'll never forget being like, wow, this tweet's really kicking off. Like maybe this is how my show gets on the map, how Apex gets on the map, da-da-da-da. And every time I commented at people who loved the joke, I was like, hey, if you find this funny, I do a podcast that's more of these jokes. And they're like, why are you promoting on this tweet? And I'm like, because I wrote this tweet. Like, if you thought this was good, like we had an episode for the movie In the Heart of the Sea, which is the Tom Holland, Chris Hemsworth fight Moby Dick origin story kind of film. And we made a joke, which was, please don't eat Tom Holland. And so we made a shirt of please don't eat Tom Holland, where it's just that with a sperm whale. And it's a great shirt. I wish it sold more because I think it was funny. I think it was hilarious. So,
well, I know we've been trying to get, you've been, every time I've had a stream, you've been like, hey, if you want me, come on. I'm like, I got to get you on. I got to get Henry on the show. This, us together is going to be entertaining, to say the least. I was so happy that my mark hadn't been spoken for yet. I was like, let's do it. Like, come on, let's make this happen.
For sure. No, it's nice because, we've been chatting on and off again as the years go by because you're, I met you when you were a wee kid and now you're growing up to be a fine adult and all that jazz. And you've come a long way in your career as an entertainer and commentator, which is really rad because it's good stuff. But a lot's gone on in the community since I left. Like there's -1, -1, like just -1. Like, what a great movie. You saw it how many times again?
I saw it 30 times.
You saw it 30 times.
30 times.
Oh, this is just a shout out to a person that I think is tuning in. Maria, he saw it 30 times. I saw it 3 times. This is a problem. Moving on. No, I saw it 3 times. I saw it opening day. I saw it again with a friend. And then Maria, who I just shouted out to on the internet, and the friend and their husband, we all got together and we saw minus color as the third and final time. And it was great. The third time was when I finally stopped crying during the movie, oh no, I lied. I saw it 4 times because I also saw it with my mother.
There we go.
I saw it with my ma.
Tommy also saw it 3 times in the theater.
Yeah, I can't wait till they actually release it. Won't that be fun? Because it's all I'm gonna be watching.
Yeah, no. So for me, -1 has been in of itself its own journey. Like I knew about it before it was announced. I knew that it was being made. I knew all this stuff. And then as more information came out, I got to see everything that I knew and then learn more. -1, the show, specifically Kaiju Conversation, we had a Yamazaki month where we covered his films to get ready for -1.
Well, you did watch them.
Yeah, so we watched Returner, Space Battleship Yamato, Parasite Part 1, Parasite Part 2.
I didn't realize he did the Parasite films.
He did.
It's so good.
It's really good. I was surprised how good it was.
Are you just talking about the films, or have you watched the anime or the manga?
I haven't watched the anime. I haven't read the manga.
It's great.
But the movies, I was like, there's no way these are this good.
The anime has one of the best bops of an opening that I really like. And also, I really need to watch Battleship Yamato.
Honestly, I know Helmy here said he loved it. In my opinion, I think Battleship Yamato is his weakest film. Now,
it probably is.
That being said, I don't think that's a negative. It's still a good movie. I just feel like that's his weakest.
I mean, he's a phenomenal director. A lot of the stuff that he works, the films that I really want to watch are his After Sunset films. I believe I just butchered their title. But the fact that he has been secretly working on this Godzilla movie since I don't know if you're old enough to. Do you remember Tokyo Monsters?
I don't know Tokyo Monsters.
Oh, see, I just aged myself by centuries. So back in the day, jingle, jingle, jingle. Back in the day, there was a website called Tokyo Monsters. So like there were two websites, Toho Kingdom and Tokyo Monsters. And you went to Tokyo Monsters because they had clips of Godzilla movies and Gamera movies and all that jazz. So like if you hadn't seen the movies, you could at least see like a good 2 minutes of a fight scene or all that jazz. And it was right after Final Wars had ended and Godzilla was done. And then these clips of a CGI Godzilla attacking 1954 Japan started popping up. And people were like, what does this mean? And then you find out that it's like a dream sequence in a comedy. And you're like, what is going on? But then like when Godzilla the Ride was announced and that he was attached to that as well, I was like, oh, he took his little idea that he was doing in his comedy and he got to make it into a ride. And the ride was super successful. And then Toho was like, knock, knock. Your time to shine has come. And I feel like Toho was not expecting -1 to be the hit that it is today.
The biggest Godzilla movie in history for Toho at this point.
I feel like they're like, I thought this movie wasn't going to do great internationally. Could you imagine the phone call that they must have gotten where it's like, hey, can we extend the release for a bit? And like, oh, did some of the fans miss it the first week? It's like, no, everybody's watching it in America. It's literally the most watched movie in America at this time. The only other movie that was beating it was The Boy and the Heron, another Japanese film in the American box office during Christmas time, just knocking everything out. I didn't get to see Boy and the Heron, though.
No, but to add on to that, another thing that both of those films shared that I thought was very magical was they both got nominated for an Oscar, and they both won an Oscar. I think this is the first time in Oscar history that two Japanese films won Oscars, two different ones.
It's a whole thing. Like, it's very I mean, I will note, like, good on Boy and the Heron, but Nimona was also nominated for this year, and I feel like Nimona should have gotten it because I liked Nimona, but I haven't seen Boy and the Heron, so that's just my personal opinion based off my own thing. But also, the Oscars is full of nonsense. Do you remember when you realized the Oscars was nonsense? Because I clearly remember when I realized the Oscars were nonsense.
Honestly, I don't. So, like, I unironically take the day off every year to watch it. And, like, I'll, like, sit there and I'll, like, guess what movie's going to win, even if I haven't seen it. I don't know. There's just something about it that's just, like, you know what? It's an award show. Like, at the end of the day, like, there's contention behind award shows, but for some reason I still put it to some sort of standard, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it was back in high school, and I believe it was the Oscars for that where it happened in 2008. And for special effects, Transformers was nominated for an Oscar for special effects. And it lost to The Golden Compass. And I will never understand how a movie that the first Transformers film was good, but like it's aged weirdly and all that jazz. But special effects wise, you got to admit, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but for those or if people watching this at home are not aware of this, but they actually 3D scanned every part of the car or the vehicles that they were transforming to make sure that the robot's mass was still the same. And that, like, so every piece was transformed. And in some of those sequences, you literally could see every piece of the car. Like, the only thing that was really added were, like, maybe Optimus's head. But everything was scanned and done that. And I still don't understand how that lost to talking polar bears. Like, oh, it gets me mad.
It might have been when Shape of Water won.
I just remembered. I just watched a movie called The Red Turtle a few weeks ago.
Okay.
It's an animated film. There's no talking in it. Well, there's some vocalization, but there's no like actual dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Very beautifully animated film. It's about a man who gets stranded on an island. He tries to leave the island, and this like giant red turtle is keeping him on the island. And then it turns out that he kills the turtle, but then the turtle turns into a woman, and they start having like a relationship and all that jazz. And I'm sitting here like, because it won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature of the year that it did, I do believe. And I just sat there being like, we're all talking about, and like, pardon my language for viewers at home, but Shape of Water won, and like the Monster Fucker community got so happy that, you know, they were being seen. But I sat there being like, wait, have 2 Monster Fucker movies won Academy Awards? Are we in the timeline where 2 of these films have won Academy Awards, where people who want to romantically woo a monster has won an Academy Award? That's wild. Absolutely bananas.
See, I think it was more like when that happened, I was like, you know, it feels more like they gave it because it's Del Toro, and it's a sin that he hasn't won an Oscar before this.
I have a lot of thoughts on Del Toro. I think his stuff. I have this whole conniption fit saying that Del Toro is a phenomenal director through and through. Like, cannot be disagreed, all that jazz. But I think he hasn't made a good movie since Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. I feel like that was around Pan's Labyrinth time as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he started to get Hollywoodized, he became more of an aesthetic than a choice. I think the last Del Toro film I genuinely enjoyed was Pinocchio. Because I loved The Shape of Water the first time, and then when we did it for the podcast, I realized it's just fish, dick, and eggs. It was a C- film. Because they muddle the plot too much, in my opinion, with The Shape of Water.
And I would say that Del Toro is the biggest reason for your problem.
Of the K word?
Huh?
The hatred for the K word?
Yeah.
Oh, Michael Hamilton putting me on his podcast for the first time, being Henry the host hates kaiju, and I'm like, yes, I do. We're Daikaiju stuff, but your show does it well, uses the word well, because you do different monster movies that showcase. Because like I always tell when people are like, "What's your favorite kaiju film?" I'm like, Aliens. Aliens is my favorite kaiju film because it's filled with strange beasts.
This is true.
But that's what you get when you live in a country that doesn't speak English for 5 years, and you realize the importance of like language use. But we're not going to talk about the my utter hatred for the K word, because we're here to talk about Daikaiju and all sorts of other really fun things. It's really weird too, because there is a double standard, because like I can't stand kaiju, but whenever I see an Ultraman monster, I will call it an ultra kaiju, because I'm like, but it is an ultra kaiju. There, I guess maybe it's because there's that prefix,
right,
of ultra, and I'm like, it's an ultra strange beast because it's seen in the Ultraman franchise. So yeah, but you've done some reading lately.
I've been reading a story.
As I rub my own ego.
I don't know if you've heard of it. Maybe you have. It's called Apex. Have you heard of this?
I have. I've been writing this stupid story for nearly 20 years now. Been writing it for 2 decades, I realized today.
So
2 decades of work.
Where did the idea come from? I love hearing this stuff.
So the reason why I wrote Apex is because I am autistic, and in high school, everybody's learning all sorts of stuff, and I didn't understand social situations whatsoever, and I was having a really hard time understanding social situations. And then one day I was at the beach with my friends, and we were play fighting in the water, and they because they were my friends, they started to do what all my friends do, which is get to know Godzilla monsters. So like one of them was like, I'm King Caesar, and I'm Titanosaurus, and da 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 da. And we were duking it out, and I'm like, this would be a lot more fun if we were our own monsters. And then I was like, that's it. I'm going to turn everyone I know into monsters. So, fun fact, all the creatures in Apex are more or less inspired by people that I know, and a lot of their behavior, social interactions, fights, and all that jazz are actually based off like real social events that I have experienced, which is why I hate breakups, because I'll write a whole wonderful storyline for someone's relationship and I'm really proud of it, and then they break up and I'm like, do you know how long it took me to get these pieces to work in a way that made me happy and sane? And now you broke up and I have to rewrite the whole thing again? I remember someone broke up and I was like, do you know that I literally have combined your monsters together, and now since you guys are not dating anymore, one of you has to die? Like, one of your components has to fail. I have, in this current draft, that plot line is no longer needed because I've started to decide whether or not like certain plot lines need to stay, and then overarching narratives. But yeah, that's more or less the origin story, is that Apex is this epic science fiction giant monster bash, but it's also a fictionalized biography of my life.
So is that why the name of the person is Winston? Or in this one?
Yes. Rick Winston is supposed to be a very Henry character. But you'll find out in the story, like, Rick's an important major character, but I try to avoid... Apex is a series, because like it is a series. It will not be like just one movie. It will not be multiple. Like it's definitely multiple stories. Like the biggest influence I would say on Apex is Godzilla the series. Godzilla the series is a huge influence on my storytelling. But the one thing that bugged me is like, and I get it. It's a kid's show. Like it's a kid's cartoon show. You need your main characters to be recurring characters through and through. But you always get the characters that know what's going on. And I kind of hate that. That's why I love Cloverfield. I thought it was so interesting to see normal people in Cloverfield. And like the story you read, Apex Rising, obviously is Rick-centric. But as the stories continue, Rick doesn't show up. Rick doesn't show up again in Apex until episode 10. Like, Rick doesn't show up until episode 10. Like, all the other stories are Rickless, as it were, because they're other characters. There are other people. And these monsters start showing up around the world, and they're being interacted with by other people. Like, there are soldiers dealing with genetic abominations. There are explorers trying to rescue people in a cave system, and they discover that there's a giant monster ecosystem in the cave system, and before people in chat or whatever go like, oh, isn't that Hollow Earth? Jules Verne invented the genre. I love it. The Hollow Earth theory is played in Apex. I call it the Hollowed World because I thought that sounded a little bit more interesting, because also in the Hollow World, that is where the Antiquity class monsters live, and they are based off mythical creatures, so it's hallowed grounds. So, yeah.
So
there's a lot of war.
So, as somebody who, I don't want to call myself a creative, but as somebody who has created content, I always find it interesting to hear what other people do to create the thoughts in their head or the images. So is the way you do creativity, is it like based off of like your experiences in life?
It's a lot of write what you know, obviously. The biggest rule in any writing class is write what you know. But I do a lot of research. As like Elijah, as you know, I've worn many hats. I've been a paleontologist. I've done marine biology. I've been a botany assistant. I was a teacher. I have been in films. I've been in documentaries. I've been a podcaster. I almost got married once. Like there's, I've done a lot for my 32 years of existence. And all those experiences have like really given me some insight in the human condition. But what I also like to do, like, when people ask me like, what was it like writing Apex for the first time? I'm like, I used to sit at the table, which I still have in this apartment here in New York. I would drink a bottle of cranberry juice and play Matchbox 20. And I would write these monster stories. And nowadays it's changed a bit, but it depends on what story I'm tackling, pretty much. Like for Rising, I know Rising so well at this point. Like I could literally have anything on, and I do like I just try to remember like my influences, but make sure that my influences are not dictating the story. Because that's something that I always fear about, especially with how the MonsterVerse is going. I just don't want people to think when Apex is out later this year that like I'm just writing this Apex MonsterVerse story. I'm like, no. I've been working on this since 2004. I have proof. I have copyrights in the Library of Congress. But the creative process is usually like self-reflective moments of my life. And then I try to incorporate monsters into it. Like recently I had a friendship issue, and I now have started diddling notes. Spoilers, Elijah. Tyrannus is the Henry monster of the series. And so I've been working on how Tyrannus was sharing a territory with another monster, but due to Tyrannus's like behavior, the other monster wanted Tyrannus out of the territory. So like that's where the conflict came from. Mm-hmm. And I always try to explore and I think going that way also helps me in my life become a little bit more neutral and understanding of like where another person is coming from. Because there's no evil monsters in the series. Like there are bad monsters. There are monsters eating people, but like I feel like humans are the only ones that are capable of evil. So like, for example, the creature that you are referenced in the teaser for the next episode of Rising, Zots, is this chupacabra hybrid creature who eats people and is quite violent and becomes like a joke is like America's #1 villain and all this jazz. But like Zots is just surviving. It's like I do have characters go like, just to be clear, it's bad. We know that it's bad that it's eating humans, but if you were in Zots' position, ravenously hungry, and you see all these creatures that are smaller than you, because like a lot of animals eat ants, bears eat ants, and that's kind of the logic that I use for like some of the creatures that eat humans is like the logic of like, yeah, bears eat ants, guys. Like large things do eat smaller things, not because there's more of them and it's easier to get a hold of them. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of death in Apex. I really hope people are okay with, because like it's also the idea of turning these creatures into natural disasters that are aware that you exist. Like the idea of a hurricane chasing you is terrifying.
Right.
So, but I'm glad you liked it.
I did. For me, one of my favorite parts was the portion on the boat.
Wait, which boat scene? The one with the father and the son?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
The fishing scene.
Yes. There was something about that part specifically I really enjoyed.
I really like writing that part. I will say, and spoilers for the listeners at home, but I realized, and I don't know if you realize this, but I kill a kid in each act of that story. Did not realize it, not the purpose, but like someone was reading it and they're like, Henry, you killed a kid in each act. And I was like, no, I didn't. I didn't kill a bunch of kids in the first story, did I? And I'm like reading through and I'm like, oh my God, I killed a bunch of kids in the first story. But I think because the thing is, like, the first two parts of Act 1 are introducing Rick and then also adding to the intrigue of like someone that does know what's going on, but is also aware that they don't really get what is going on.
Right.
And exploring that trauma. And I really love writing the boat scene of the father trying, like, because that's also supposed to be showing like the world has people that are not scientists. The world has average Joes doing their life. And I think the best way to experience that is like through a family lens. And like, true, it's tragic, but I think it adds a lot of tension because also it doesn't just show like the possibility that like, yeah, there are these giant monsters now in the series, but it also introduces you to the Sparker Prawn for the first time, which is a creature that lives on Tyrannus. And like you get to see the Sparker Prawns and the other parasite on Tyrannus later on in Act 2. Like they're not just used for a scene, like, but they do set up that like there's more issues that come with these creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you like that part.
Yeah, and there was also I like that you brought up Cloverfield earlier because I got a lot of Cloverfield. Not references. I mean, there is a Cloverfield reference.
Yes, there is a straight up Cloverfield reference, which I that was the first time I've ever written that joke in this draft, and I hope that doesn't get me in trouble. But because that's another thing I cannot stand about the Monsterverse. Like it drives me absolutely bananas because I don't think people realize nobody talks about monster movies in these monster movies, which means like it means that the 1933 classic King Kong probably doesn't exist in the Monsterverse, which means that like Madison Russell has never seen the Lord of the Rings that we know and love. And I think that's horrifying because like those stories influence so many people in this day and age. And then you introduce this world where like no one's made a reference to like old B movies or anything like that. Like Godzilla 98 did. They literally showed clips of it came from beneath the sea. It shows that this world has a grasp that monster movies exist.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons why I like the Kong Skull Island anime that was on Netflix, because they actually reference Clifford the Big Red Dog by name as an example of a giant monster, which made me really happy and seen. But that was this is something that I wanted to explore, is because like I don't think people realize that giant monsters can't exist. They cannot exist. But we know them. We love them.
Right.
And in fact, in Apex, there is a Godzilla series. It's not called Godzilla. It's called Tyrant. It's actually a huge reference to a buddy of mine, William Cope, who wrote Tyrantus. Are you aware of the Atomic Age of Monsters?
I think so.
Will has written 2 books. They're both great. I highly recommend them. I actually think they're not in arm's reach. So, Will, if you watch this, I'm sorry I can't promote your book properly, but you can get them on Amazon. They're really great books. Will and I met on DeviantArt. And we met because he had Tyrantis and I had Tyrannus. So we always joked how like close our monster names were, and we used to do like collabs of them fighting each other. And then we met at G-Fest, and I was like, "Oh, is that Tyrantus?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Dude, I'm the guy that made Tyrannus." So we started hanging out more and all that jazz. And I wanted to like incorporate Will's work into Apex, so I've turned his book series into the giant monster franchise that exists in the world. But then I also like I sprinkle in some really cool tidbits into it that I think are a lot of fun. But like that's like a point of reference. So like the Cloverfield in that universe is different than the one we have because that Cloverfield is being based off what we've seen in the Tyrant series, which is a series about monsters living underground. It's a whole funny thing. Like the first Tyrant films in '54, it's like a huge commercial success. It's really fun. Like I have a lot of fun like playing around with the Tyrant concept.
See, stuff like that, that's something that I often think about in movies is like, as an example, Marvel movies. So the upcoming Captain America movie, they had to recast William Hurt because he passed away.
Yes.
So they got Harrison Ford. They referenced Star Wars in like every Marvel movie since like 2013.
Yeah.
So like Star Wars exists in this universe. But now Harrison Ford is playing a character.
See, and that's the thing, right? Like you got to be careful when you reference IP because like I don't think a lot of content creators who make worlds and stories think about this often, but like again, as I said earlier, when you're watching the Monsterverse, Peter Jackson is probably not even a film director in that universe because King Kong 33 doesn't exist.
Right.
Because like no one's sitting there like, oh, isn't it weird that King Kong in the movie is the same as this thing called Kong? Which I will note, one of my favorite things about the Monsterverse is they have not called him King Kong yet. And I feel like we're gonna they're gonna call him King Kong in
really?
the New Empire. I think because he's gonna become king of the Congo apes in Congo 2 Electric Boogaloo. You were there. I'm glad that you joined us for the Congo viewing because now you understand my mad ravings of like, oh, isn't it weird that there's a gorilla that speaks sign language with a glove that goes to an underground civilization with a bunch of killer gorillas with crystals. We're being duped into watching Congo once again. But it's just like one of those things that I think that I want Apex to do is to explore those more realistic concepts of, and like I also have fun because like I realize that with these monsters, like our own history has changed because by the like, so spoilers, by the time I think it's so in 2020 in Apex, aliens show up. So everything that happened in our 2020 doesn't happen because we're too busy fighting aliens. And I realized like that changes politics, that changes behavior, that changes so much stuff. And like I'm entering new ground, so I have to do a lot of what if scenarios. The thing about writing Apex means that I have to be aware and current with not just like giant monster stuff, but like I got to know my politics. I have to know my like how people ask. Like I met somebody at a party recently that does press conferences, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to hit you up because I need to know if my press conferences are accurate. Like, would politicians react to a giant monster in this correct way? And I talk to my science friends like, hey guys, let's move aside the fact that something as big as Tyrannus coming out of the water would literally die the moment it came out of the water. I need to know if this works. It's one of the reasons why also Tyrannus's design has changed so drastically over the years is because I wanted to incorporate more of Tyrannus looking like a more believable animal that is semi-aquatic and all that jazz, which is why I think the big reveal that Tyrannus can stand up is so cool because, bears are semi-aquatic and they can do that too. So it's just, I have a lot of fun with my natural history background with the creature design.
So with that being said, out of curiosity, and this is my little tokusatsu brain, when I hear Tyrannus, I think about a movie that you might know called Attack of the Super Monsters.
So I've actually never seen Attack of the Super Monsters.
Really?
Tyrannus. So there's a sequence that you read in Apex, and I love this sequence. And this sequence is actually still really fresh, but I was writing when I was writing Apex, I was like, how and why would they call it Tyrannus? Like, how would that name come up?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you read the article about Apex and Kaiju Ramen, but I gave Michael the original Tyrannus design from when I was a little kid, because I've been making this thing called Tyrannus for years, because it's just T-Rex with an us. Because I love how Tyranno sounds, and then I just did the us because I thought it sounded trendy. Like, I've been doing this since I've been making Tyrannus since I was 8. Like, Tyrannus has always had fangs, like, well, tusks and all that jazz. And the tusks are obviously a love letter to my favorite giant monster, Gamera. And I will also note the fact that Stegoros, the second monster that shows up, is a Stegosaurus. As Apex Rising started to take form, I was like, isn't it kind of weird that I kind of accidentally paralleled a Godzilla and Gearus kind of dynamic? Did not mean to do that on purpose, but I'm happy it's there. Like, if you want to turn that into an Easter egg, I'm all for it. I don't think that's a bad reference to do, like, to reference that. But I came up with Tyrannus on my own, and I was trying to figure out how, like, why would they call it Tyrannus? And I was like, Rick made up Tyrannus, just like how I made up Tyrannus as a kid. And I really like that it's a slip of the tongue for Rick and like being at a press conference, like him accidentally saying it is really cool. I really enjoyed writing that sequence, because like I had someone give me comments that they really like Rick. They like that Rick is this like non-binary, like transmasc non-binary, which is not seen in the genre ever. Rick is from all I know, Rick is the only transmasc non-binary character in science fiction at this moment. And I love the fact that like that tension, as well as Rick's celebrity status, like kind of makes Rick the unknowing, like Nick Totopoulos, but doesn't want to be Nick Totopoulos. Like, it's very clear Rick does not want to be doing this. But also Rick feels compelled because Rick is a scientist, and no matter what, like, you know, I saw a video on Instagram that was doing like that side by side, like, we're herpetologists. And I loved one where it's like, we're herpetologists. Of course we're going to dive into a bush to grab a snake. And I'm like, and that's what scientists do. And Rick is a scientist. So like, of course, when this giant dinosaur comes out of the ocean, Rick is not going to look for shelter. Rick is going to follow the giant dinosaur, because this thing like represents everything Rick has ever believed in. So, but no, I've not seen Attack of the Super Monsters. I've been meaning to. Are you telling me that there's a monster called Tyrannus?
The Lord Tyrannus, yes, who's a T-Rex.
You know what? I'll be fine, because like also Lord Tyrannus and Star Wars. I'm okay. I'm okay. We can Count Dooku this all day long.
So, out of curiosity, now, like you said, Apex has been a thing since 2004. So obviously, this is a thing before Apex existed in the Monsterverse.
Yes.
So when you found out that Apex was going to be a thing, what went through your head?
So it made me upset because of so. Here's the thing. I have had to I'm not changing Apex, because the thing is, I have changed the title of this series 3 times. Apex being the 3rd time. Apex, and then I was like, Apex, a giant monster story, because I thought that was a better title, because I think that just makes it a little bit more unique and very clear that it's a giant monster story. Originally, this thing was called Titan Wars.
Okay.
And the monsters were not apex organisms; they were titans. And I like years, like I even had it in the like when I first did the Library of Congress copyright for the series, it was under Titan. Like because I changed the Titan Wars because I was like, that's very high school Henry. I'm just going to call it Titan. And they're going to be Titans because I love Titan mythology and I thought that would be very interesting. And then King of the Monsters came out and they kept calling them Titans. And I was like, I had people messaging me and be like, hey, just saw the new Godzilla trailer. How sweaty are you right now? And I'm like, I'm sweating. I'm just all over the place. And I couldn't figure out what to do because I was like, I don't want to call them monsters and I don't want to do that. And because the thing is, like, during that era, like How to Train Your Dragon 2, Godzilla King of the Monsters, other movies, they kept talking about the apex predator, the apex thing. And the thing is, that's not correct. Like, you can call something an apex predator, but like you can't, like, calling something an apex species, like the proper terminology is like a keystone species. It's very thing. And I was like, I want to use apex, but I want to use it better. And I was like, an apex organism, because then it also signifies the individuality of the creature or the phenomenon of the creature, even though some apex organisms do have multiple individuals of the species. But I started to explore that, and I just thought that was it. I was like, an apex organism, because it sounds more official than monster or daikaiju or kaiju or titan. Like, it sounds more believable. Like, there's less mysticism in it. And so like I was like, I'll just call the series Apex. And then I was like, Apex, the giant monster story. And then I saw Godzilla versus Kong, and I was like, fuck. Just because my dad even was like, isn't that the name of your story? And I'm like, I don't look, they're a cybernetics company. Whatever. I don't care. I don't care. Like, that's not the name of this movie. The movie is not called Apex. I'm fine. I'm okay. Damn. Just like, they need to stop. So
First with Titans, then Apex, then Doug. What's next?
Oh God, I don't know, man. I really hope, like, Doug's gonna be in this movie. I'm gonna be foaming at the mouth. My friends are gonna have to like carry me out of the theater probably because of that dumb dog. My friend said it best. She was like, "Oh God, Henry, they're gonna do a boy and his Doug with the little mini Kong," and I'm like, "They are gonna do the mini Kong and Doug as like a pet situation. It's gonna make me mad. It's gonna make me so. And if they don't do it, I'm gonna even be madder because that's right there. It's literally right there. Like, it's a perfect joke. Because I also have this really sneaky feeling. That Doug is going to be revealed to be a baby Godzilla.
Really?
And it's going to be like the Minya of the franchise. And I'm really upset. And I'll be also more upset if they don't do it, because that's just dumb. Like, they set it up so well. Now that they have Little Kong. So.
That'd be interesting. I know... I'm trying to think if it was Jared or Wingard. But one of them said that they viewed Doug as a subspecies of Godzilla.
Yeah. I really need Adam Wingard to respond to my text. Well, my messages to him about Doug. I really need Adam. Adam, if you're watching this for a random thing, like, we need to talk, because I don't want money. Just like my name in the credits. Just being like Henry Coin Doug. That's all I want. Like, it's literally all I want. Or a job. Like, if you thought that writing was great, wait till you see Apex. But no, I think just going back to Apex, because like I sit here being like, how did you feel about Stegoros? Because I know we don't get a lot of time with Stegoros, but the double event of it all, I think, is something fun.
I thought that was really cool. I don't know, there was something about both of their appearances that I thought was really novel. it didn't feel like a rehash, right? It felt very much like it was its own thing, which I love that.
That's really flattering, actually, because I keep sitting here like, oh man, I have a monster come out of the ocean. Like everybody's gonna be like, no shit. There's a monster comes out of an ocean in the giant monster story. The thing is, like, so I've always wanted multiple monsters in the first story. In fact, in the earliest drafts of when it was still Titan Wars, it was supposed to be 3 monsters showing up at the same time. But I changed it, and I just really like the idea of Tyrannus and Stegoros being the first 2 monsters of the series, because they're both dinosaurs. So like them appearing is really crazy. And like why I picked Salt Lake City as the other event, I have no idea. I cannot remember. I honestly think I picked Salt Lake City just because Utah is known for Stegosaurus fossils. And I just thought Salt Lake would be who's heard of a monster movie that has taken place in Salt Lake City? No one. So here I am, Salt Lake City. And then obviously Singapore was a location because I wanted someplace that in Asia that was a big metropolitan place that wasn't Japan. Japan does eventually get giant monsters to attack it, and there will be references to be like, wow, it attacked Tokyo, but that's not until what is called the Genesis event, which is the first time a alien monster shows up in the series, and it crashes into Tokyo, and then there's a huge brawl between Tyrannus, the mech of the series, the MGAV unit, and a monster that's introduced in that story called Griff, which is this like giant host eagle griffin that flies to is like the natural enemy of this alien creature, because it turns out it's visited before. And it's the Genesis event is like a big, it's going to be a page turner is probably the best way I'm going to say it, because like it'll start off with like the like Rick's there, and Rick's going to Japan because he's like on the trail for Tyrannus, because Tyrannus is like very elusive. There's archaeologists in New Zealand who discover this like lost Maori legend that about apex organisms back in the day, and finding Griff's body in the Hooker Glacier. And then the MGAF unit is like starting to be viewed as this like hero, because it's the first time and I want to be clear, something that I've done with the giant robots, because like, how can I write a giant monster series and not throw a robot into it? That would be weird. There's no Mecha Tyrannus, by the way. I do wanna squash that real fast. There will be no Mecha Tyrannus. If there is a Mecha Tyrannus, it's news to me. But Tyrannus does not get mechanized, because I don't understand that logic sometimes. Like, I get it with the aliens. I love when Mechagodzilla is built by aliens, but yeah, sometimes I'm like, really? Mechagodzilla? We're gonna build a robot Godzilla and just okay, that's fine. Like, go on, Apex, do your thing. But the giant robots in the Apex universe are viewed as knights, and knights are always smaller than dragons. And I really wanted to play like the AMGAV units don't get bigger than like 25 feet tall.
Okay.
So like, the AMGAV unit starts beating up monsters and like slaying them and stuff, and it like is a whole thing. So like when this alien shows up, it's a huge like. It's a really interesting fight, because it's also like a different stages alien. Like Akukiri, which is the alien monster, is a love letter to a lot of classic giant monster alien creatures. So I have a lot of fun with Akukiri. I really can't wait to showcase Akukiri to you guys one day.
Now, with that, out of curiosity, before we go off on a tangent, what is the plan for Apex's release?
So right now, the goal is to get the first 3 stories of Apex ready for Kaiju Brooklyn. I want to have the stories ready for Kaiju Brooklyn, and what will probably most likely happen is that I will be publishing them through Amazon Publishing. There is a part of me that also wants to see if I can print out physical copies of the stories and have them in person and like sell them to people as like these exclusive physical copies that like, you know, they're just paperback with butterfly pins and stuff, but like, you know, I'll sign them and, you know, I'll just be like, don't lose it, because this could be like worth a lot of money in like a few years. Like you're on the ground floor with this story. But the goal is that, or at least get the first 2 stories done for sure, because I know for a fact I can get Project Stoker done before June. I want to get all 3 stories because I think the first 3 stories are really important. Like Apex Rising is incredibly important, Project Stoker is incredibly important, and the 3rd story, Proteus Gate, the Proteus Gate, is really important because they do set up the 3 different types of monsters that you normally see in the franchise. That's the plan. I'm also in the process of trying to get Apex pitched to bigger companies because I would love to do a comic. There is actually a webtoon where Kaiju Hime has done the art, and the webtoon got through. The webtoon actually got halfway through Rick's interview in the detention cell at the Singapore airport before health things got in the way. But that's the goal. Like I originally had an audio drama idea, but that's just a lot of work. So right now I'm just trying to get it out there. So I'm writing them as short stories or novellas, and I just want them released and published. And I want readers like you in the genre to appreciate them, and I also want people who are not in the genre to appreciate them. I think Apex is a good, like, I know this sounds really not humble, but I think Apex is a good enough story for those who are not familiar with giant monsters to enjoy. I want it to have the Jurassic Park effect. You do not have to like monsters to like Apex. And so far, test readers like yourself and some other test readers that have been giving me feedback have been really enjoying the human aspect. And like they're like, it's so refreshing to see that you're not relying on the monster action to tell this story.
Mm-hmm. And that might be a great segue into a bit of a tangent. So that is one of the biggest debates I've seen in recent time in this fandom, is about, do you want more monster action and less humans, or do you want more humans and less monster action? And that's a pretty big topic of discussion for a lot of people.
It is, and I just sit here being like, Godzilla -1 kind of proved the point that you can't tell a story without human characters. I'm curious about Godzilla X Kong because it looks like there are not a lot of human characters when Kong meets the other apes. Because they just released a clip today and they're shocked at Zuko's appearance, which I'm just like, oh, so they weren't there when Kong met Zuko. That's interesting, because that means we're going to be following Kong on his own without human characters. Interesting. I'm curious to see how that plays, because we've never really seen that before.
Right.
Like, in the truth. Like, that's the thing. Like, all these fans are complaining, like, oh, there's not enough monster action. I'm like, have you seen a movie with a lot of monster action? Because, like, they're really far and in between. Like, you know, most Godzilla movies are mostly human characters and then the title sequences. It's why I wrote a review on Letterboxd about why I like Godzilla versus Kong. Just because they do a good job of handling the human story, but they know the human story just propels you to why you're there, to see Godzilla get punched by a big monkey on a boat. Because that's why I was there. Like, that's what I want to see. But -1, I think, really... I mean, I'm sure there are people who. I mean, I've seen some reviews on Letterboxd that people have complained about the overuse of humans in -1, but I'm like, that's why this movie won an Oscar. Like, and that's something that Apex is exploring too. Like, I think I have only one story that is only monsters, and you'll laugh, but the premise of it is literally a nature documentary that goes over the 3 types of monsters: the Leviathan class, the Behemoth class, and the Ziz class. And it's like, I'm gonna write it like a David Attenborough nature documentary, because that's like the only way I can think of writing a story where it's just monsters. Because like I think we wouldn't have Kong only scenes in this upcoming film if Kong didn't speak sign language. Because then we're probably going to get subtitles or something. I don't know.
Right.
Because like, I don't know how I feel personally about knowing that if there are no human characters, we're just going to see Kong like grunting a lot. And that seems a little too avant-garde for my taste for a monster movie. Like, silent films, like no dialogue films, are very hit or miss, and you have to be careful of how. Like, there's a great movie I just watched. I just watched it with Maria. What was it called? It was Hulu. It's about aliens. I think it's like They Won't Come to Save You or something like that. It's about a woman who lives alone and aliens invade. It's very good. The ending's weird, but it's very good. But there's very minimal dialogue in the first act of the film. And I'm like, this is great. But then I realized, like, man, if they don't say something soon, I don't know what I'm going to do. So how do you feel about it?
Okay. So I have went on the record many times on my growing disdain for specifically the Wingard team and Godzilla versus Kong, and how I have not a lot of faith in Godzilla X Kong for to deliver on what I think is a good monster movie. I'm kind of the opinion I go for the monsters and I stay for the humans. Like, I want to see Godzilla destroying Ginza. I want to see Godzilla using his atomic breath. But the story of like -1 is what kept me engaged and wanting to stay and wanting to see the story continue.
One of my favorite experiences I had watching -1 in theaters was with the second time I saw it with my friend Tosh. And we were watching it, and it was during this. It was in the first part. It was before his dream sequence, when he's getting flashbacks to Odo Island. And it was right during the dream sequence. Tosh leans over to me and goes, "Henry," and I'm like, "What?" She goes, "I forgot we were watching a Godzilla movie." And I was like, you know what? I think that's what I want. I think that's what I want in my monster movies. And I don't know how you're going to feel about this next part, but she has said that to me in another aspect, another Godzilla movie. There's only one other franchise of Godzilla films that my friend has leaned over to me and gone, "I forgot we were watching a Godzilla movie." And it's the anime trilogy. Because I don't know how you feel about Elijah. I absolutely adore the anime trilogy. I think they're some of my favorite films of the Reiwa era. I know when I told her, like, these films are actually like hated by a lot of Godzilla fans, and she was like, how are they hated? And I was like, well, I'm not a therapist. But that's why I like them, because they're not very Godzilla films, and the human, like the characters that you're getting attached to, like sure, he is very Eren Yeager in space, Attack on Titan in the future, and Godzilla is also there kind of vibe. But I think that is the strength of those films, is the fact that like you are supposed to care about these human characters, and Godzilla is more of a standing there looking at you feel. But what do you think? I loved Planet Eater, by the way.
Okay, Planet Eater is the best of the trilogy.
Yes.
I don't understand people that say that one's the worst. I don't get that. I would say it's pretty okay. Like, it's not bad. It's not just okay. It's pretty okay. You know, it's kind of middle.
You definitely look twice.
Yes. Planet of the Monsters is a solid okay. It's not bad. There's a lot of potential.
So you're in the City of the Edge of Battle camp still.
I cannot stand that POS. I cannot do City on the Edge of Battle.
It took me some time, but I eventually started to really jive with the City on the Edge of Battle. I really, really start to jive with it. I do consider the weakest of the three, 100%. But but that's the thing. I think that felt like, I just think the fact that I sat with a friend who, I mean, granted, she grew up on Godzilla the series, which I think is super cool. Like, giant monsters are not unfamiliar to her. Like, when I first came over, I was like, wow, you have Godzilla stuff, and we aren't even fully friends yet. Like, oh, very exciting to see. But you know, I think the fact that I have sat with a friend who's not into the genre as much as I am, and I've had 2 times where they said, I forgot we were watching Godzilla movie, and they've told me that the films I've watched are their favorite films, is very fascinating, which is why I kind of want to show them Shin Godzilla. But I watched Shin Godzilla recently. Have you watched Shin Godzilla recently?
I have not watched it recently.
Yeah, it's weird after -1. It is. I don't think I like it. I don't think I like Shin Godzilla. I used to love Shin Godzilla. Now I think it's not good. Like, I mean, it's good, but like at the same time, no. The best way I could describe it is Shin Godzilla is now the McDonald's at home. Like, we want -1. We've got -1 at home, and it's Shin Godzilla. And you're like, that's not it. That's not what I'm craving.
See, when I first saw it in theaters back in 2017? 2016.
2016.
2016. God, that's almost been 10 years, Henry. I don't like that. I don't like that thought.
Welcome to getting old, where everything, like, I just realized that 1991 was 30 years ago. 33 years ago. The 90s are dead. The 90s are the new 80s.
Oh, no.
Actually, technically, they're the new 70s. The 90s are the new 70s. It's a very spooky time.
I don't like that. So Shin Godzilla, I have not. When I first saw it, I walked out like livid. I was like, "This is utter garbage." I didn't walk out like before the movie ended, but when the movie was over, I was like, "This is garbage. This is awful." But as time has went on, I've started to admit, okay, it's okay. Like, I haven't rewatched it in like 5 years, but it's okay. You know, there's some decent aspects to it, but for the most part, it's not up to par. I am curious eventually, like when I cover it on the show, we haven't even hit the 70s yet. Like we just hit Destroy All Monsters this year. But that's because we don't want to cover just Godzilla movies. We want to actually do other stuff.
Yeah, the fan podcast thing. I'm familiar.
I'm curious to think if I will end up appreciating it more or not liking it again.
I am shocked because I technically watched it recently because Lily and I did a really good commentary track on Shin Godzilla. And it's Lily's favorite film. Like, we had a meme for the podcast at the time where it was like the creator and their favorite Godzilla, and mine was Godzilla, like the Singular Point Godzillas, because they're Singular Point. It's Godzilla -1, and then it's Singular Point. I love Singular Point. I love Singular Point to death. I think it's also because I'm insane, and I watched it from the start to the latest episode when it was being released. So I've gone crazy because I now see all the lines that show is doing. And it's my go-to, like, watch. Like, if I need something on in the background while I'm cleaning all day, that's what I'm putting on. Like, I know that story back to back. But that's Lily's favorite. So we watched it. Lily talked highly of it. I talked highly of it. I mean, granted, I was still on the reins of Shin Ultraman, which is awful. Awful. I can't stand Shin Ultraman. Really can't stand Shin Ultraman. I would just watch the original episodes at this point. But it was weird watching it this time around because I was expecting to still like it. And then I just kept cringing at it. And I just kept being... It just made me want to watch -1 more. And I just don't like that when a film makes me want to watch a different movie. And that's a huge sign for me. And I'm personally shocked because I used to attribute Shin Godzilla as probably the closest modern day equivalent to 54.
Right.
Which is a really big deal. And I just can't believe that I still can't believe that I rated Shin Godzilla as a 2-star film on Letterboxd. Like, that's insane for me. Like, I sit here being like, guys, I'm really sorry. I don't know what's come over me, but I don't think I like Shin Godzilla anymore. It's a really weird experience for sure.
Yeah, and for me, I think one of the biggest things. So since I saw Shin Godzilla, 5 years ago at this point, I've watched some of Anno's other works. Like I've sat through Evangelion, and I sat through the end of Evangelion, reluctantly by the end of it.
Yeah,
and then I've watched Cutie Honey, Shin Ultraman, and Shin Kamen Rider. Which, have you seen Shin Kamen Rider?
Not yet. Shin Ultraman left a taste in my mouth. Kamen Rider is one of the few things that I've not really properly put my toes in yet. So it's one of those things where I feel like I need a little bit more Kamen Rider in me before I do Shin Kamen Rider.
So I haven't watched anything Kamen Rider related.
Yeah.
I went and I saw Shin Kamen Rider in theaters. And, I've seen Shin Ultraman, I've seen Shin Godzilla, I've seen Cutie Honey, the Hideaki Anno film, Evangelion, all that. I will say that Shin Kamen Rider is the best Hideaki Anno film he has ever made. And I really liked it. Apparently, that is a hot take because most people say that's the worst.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have not heard one positive thing about that film. So that's surprising to me.
I loved the artistic vision in Shin Kamen Rider. I thought that was Anno's perfect, it felt like he knew what he was doing. It didn't feel like he didn't have a budget. It didn't feel like he didn't know what he wanted. It didn't feel like he had doubts on what kind of script he was going for. It just felt like he knew what he wanted to do and he did it.
That's... Well, now I'm a little bit more inclined to check that film out.
But like I said, it's apparently a hot take. Most people hate it.
No, you are literally the first person I've heard who said that they enjoyed that film. But whenever I hear someone liking it, I'm like, well, now I got to watch it because I gotta do judgments. But I just also really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show and to talk about Apex and talk about monsters and shooting the stuff with you. I'm just happy you read it, and I'm happy that you you thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think it's smart that you brought up the human plot, because that is something that I'm very nervous about, because there is a lot of human plot in Apex. And I don't know how the fandom's going to appreciate the fact that, like, you know, before any monster shows up, I literally give you this slice of life sequence. Like, you know, I loved writing the college classroom sequence. I think it's really fun. I like it so much that I eventually made that character. That character is actually going to come back. I have been playing around the idea of, like, ooh, I should look into survivors. Like, I should see who survived Rising, and then we should check in on them later on, see how they're doing. Because, like, something that is explored in Project Stoker and a little bit more is how people think they're a hoax. Because I think that's what America would do. Because America's very good at, like, not, like, if you're not there, you don't believe it. Even though, like, Salt Lake City is not destroyed, but downtown now has, like, a trackway that is Stegosaurus sized. And also the stegodactyls, the creatures that live on Stegoros, they become a problem. They become an ecological problem. They do start, like, roosting in buildings, and they're getting hard to get rid of and all that jazz. I have a lot of interesting takes on how the environment would handle these creatures starting to appear, which, again, is not something that you often see. I think the closest film that did that was Pacific Rim with Kaiju Blue and, like, the skeleton buildings and stuff. But
right.
It's the few things that I will give. I love a giant monster black market. I think that's such a great concept. Like, you see it a little bit in Godzilla the series as well with Cash of the Titans. Because I'm like, you know, and, like, the episode with Medusa with the mutation circus, I'm just like, I love these ideas, because that just shows the world has accepted these monsters are real. And, like, what are people going to do when they accept something's real? You're going to try and make money off it. And I just adore that concept. I love it so much. I think it's such an interesting way to really make them real. Because, like, you see it a little bit in the Monsterverse. Well, we were supposed to see it, because at the end of King of the Monsters, they're selling Kevin OG. And that just doesn't go anywhere, really. Because, like, they never explain how Apex got that skull. They never explain. It's very much a letdown. Very much a letdown. And I just, you know, it's very interesting about the Monsterverse. I don't know if I've given you this tangent, and I'm going to switch gears for a bit, speaking of Kevin and Ghidorah. I still cannot believe that the Monsterverse has given us aliens. Literally has said, aliens are real. They give us Godzilla vs. Kong with hatched Mechagodzilla, so we now have giant robots as a possibility. And you're like, oh, man, what is going to be the next movie? What is going to make Godzilla and Kong unite? And I'm like, aliens, because that is the best. That is the tried and true formula. Like, it never fails. But nope, Legendary's like, what if they're monkeying the earth? What are their mean monkeys in the ground? And Ice Godzilla. Like, oh my God, it's like a flippin' DeviantArt page. It really, really makes me upset that we got an Ice Godzilla and an angsty evil Kong. And I'm just like, you know, one of the aspects of Kong that makes Kong such a unique character is the fact that he's the last. And I like the fact that we are getting more Kongs, but at the same time, I hate it. You know, my friends and I here, we just call it the Dum Dum movie. And we're just so excited to watch the Dum Dum movie. But it's just going to be a Dum Dum movie. Like, it's just, you know, it's going to be great to watch. It's going to be fun to watch. I think we're going to get some really fun sequences and stuff. And I'm going to be sitting there, like, taking notes, because I'm like, okay, cool. Like, we can move this way, because that's something that I try. So another thing that Apex does, which is kind of a spoiler, but the first, so like I said, the first giant monster fight isn't until episode 8. Like the first actual like monster versus monster, and of course it's with Tyrannus, but it's with these apex organisms called the Muijin, and they are box jellyfish mutations that float, not in water. Like they float in water because they're jellyfish, but they have these specialized sacs on top of their medusas that absorb oxygen, and they actually float out of the water and drift to shore and hunt on land. The episode is called UFO because they're considered UFOs at first. But like Tyrannus fights a few of them, and then it turns out that their way of reproduction is through their medusas. So like when Tyrannus rips one apart, there's all these like jellyfish bits all over the beach and in the water and stuff. And the ones on the beach just shrivel up and die. But the ones in the water start turning into little Muijin. And eventually we find out there's a thing called a queen Muijin, which is just like a combined mass of jellyfish into like one giant, like Independence Day mothership sized jellyfish that floats around and eats people. Because box jellyfish are terrifying because they have eyes. They have photospores. They're able to detect. They are jellyfish that can hunt. They are jellyfish that will chase you, which is super exciting. And I had them scientifically proven. I submitted it to my friend who studies jellyfish, and they were very impressed with my research because they're like, this can't exist, but you did a very good job of showing they could exist. So I was very proud. I really am proud that a lot of my creatures are actually like science approved. Because they're like, Henry, besides the size, a lot of the stuff that you do is like theoretical but possible. And I'm like, yeah, realistic monsters. Because that's another thing with the Monsterverse. I don't know how I feel about the uranium being positive. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't think it's I think it's a bit too 1950s for my sake.
Yeah, the whole thing about how radiation's good and we use nukes and they're a good thing, it just doesn't sit with me very well.
No, they're like, oh yeah, the radiation like rejuvenates the ecosystem, and I'm like, that's not how that works at all. It's bad. It's why I liked -1, because like when Godzilla shoots its beam, like, oh man, you're gonna die because you didn't get hit by it, but you're gonna die. And then I was just watching Godzilla versus Kong, and I'm like, Bernie should be suffering from radiation poisoning because he's literally there when the building gets blasted by Godzilla's beam. Mm-hmm. He was like literally could put his hand out and get touched by it, and he should be like burning. He should be burning Bernie, but he's not. So.
But he gets to stay around and talk about conspiracy theories on his podcast.
I mean, look, I got compared to Bernie a lot when it came out, so I have a love for the character, which I think is like, I think out of podcast representation, Bernie did an okay job.
So would you say you're a part of the ever-growing membership of the Bernie Bros?
No, I don't think What a joke. What a dated joke. That's an incredibly dated joke, Elijah. I am shocked that we went there. That's an impressive joke. I have a question for you. How, you don't have to go into detail about it, but how did you like the secret ending? Because that's new.
I liked it. I thought it was really good. I think it's a surprise ending that people wouldn't expect? I'm trying to think of how to say it without saying much.
Yeah, because that is also something that I explored in this series because it's something that I cannot stand, which is these are giant monsters. How would people not know about them? Like, how would we not know? So, with that said, I just also want to ask, like, did you get spooked by the Project Stoker teaser? Because I'm quite proud of that writing, to be honest.
I thought that was really good. But one thing I do like about your writing is the way you word things makes it very easy to picture stuff in your head.
Oh, good. That's something that keeps me up at night. So that's a huge compliment.
And I love the detail, the descriptions. My favorite description you did,
all right,
is when you call the dinosaur statues Technicolor Titans. Is that what you know? Technicolor.
I know. I actually, someone who read it loved the opening of Rising as well. Technicolor marvels from an age that mankind could only learn but never experience.
I love that sentence.
So that's a real thing, by the way. I don't know if you did a Google, but in the Chiang Mai airport, there is actually a dinosaur walk.
Really?
It's a real thing. So it's based off that. There is one technicality with that scene, and I'm just going to say, nope, my universe, my rules. The story starts in 2013. That project didn't happen until 2016.
Oh.
But I'm like, my project, my rules. I don't want to change that opening because I think that opening is great. I think that really sets up this series. But I appreciate the shout out. Any other descriptions that you thoroughly enjoyed? Just curious to rub the ego a little bit more.
I'm trying to think here. The description of the foot that crashes into the college.
Stagoros's foot.
Yes, yeah, I like that one.
I had fun writing that sequence. So a question that I think of a sequence that I'm most curious about is, what did you think of the sequence with Lucas when Rick meets that man trying to save his family?
That one was okay. So those kind of, because you have two moments in the story. Correct me if I'm misremembering here, but there's two moments kind of like that where it's like him seeing reactions from people, right?
Yes, I think Rick sees. I don't know about in Act 2, but I know in Act 3. No, Act 1, when Rick's in the hotel, when Tyrannus first appears, Rick sees. We go into that, but
that's right.
Did you like Lucas? I
did, and I thought it was. I like those kind of ground zero stories. They're there, ground zero, and they're. I don't know if primitive is the right word to use there, but their immediate response and what they're doing.
See, that's good. I'm glad, because that's something that I've always wanted to do. Like, a writing exercise that I do is, I call it the bus experiment, where I'll like be in a public place and I like pick 6 or 7 people and I imagine them on a bus, and that bus gets hit by a triceratops. And I try to guess how they would react, because there would be people like me that goes like, oh my God, triceratops, how? Then there would be people like, oh my God, triceratops, why? And then there'd be people like, oh my God, my arm's broken. Oh my God, my child just got thrown out the window. Oh my God, like, how am I going to get it to work today? and I'm glad that you like Lucas, because spoilers, Lucas comes back. Lucas is a character who plays a big role in a big way that oh man, I can't wait for that shoe to drop, because let me tell you, after Rising, Lucas hates Tyrannus and will do anything to get revenge on Tyrannus. Anything. And that's all I'm going to say about that subject.
That's oddly ominous.
It's very ominous. It's supposed to be. Lucas is a really fun character, and I'm looking forward to exploring him more. Do you have any other questions for me about Apex?
I feel like that's the bulk of them. I'm sure what I would love to do is I would love to be able to sit down, come up with a decent list of questions that are very deep,
All right,
and do a bonus episode of the show.
I'm down. I mean, yeah, after you read the field guide, and maybe if you read the very, very spoilery document that I gave you, you can ask me more questions, and we could be cryptic as all get out. Because there's a lot of lore. Because this is the thing, when people say oh, it took you 20 years to get to this point, you must be really lazy with your writing. And I'm like, I am not that.
Right.
I have been working, I told you at the beginning of this episode that I have made 77 there are 77 confirmed monsters in Apex currently.
Mm-hmm.
The last time I did a draft of Apex, well, the first draft of Apex had nearly 200 monsters. Then later drafts of Apex I whittled it down to 100 monsters. Now I'm not even finished. I have done 3 waves and I'm already at 77. And when people say, well, isn't that a lot of monsters? I'm like, it is a lot of monsters, but something that I also do in Apex is there are monsters that die because they're animals. And sometimes you are not going to survive a fight.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not, some don't come back, or if they do come back, it's a different individual. Mm-hmm. There's no Tyrannus does not have regenerative powers. There's no G factor in these creatures. Some of them do have crazy regenerative powers, like Zots does, but that comes at a price, and that also leads to other things. There's a whole thing called the Z mutations, and that might be a great question for you when you do when you look at the series Bible, because I have put a lot of lore into this series. The world that you guys start off with, I can tell you pretty much anything that happens off screen, what's going on, what's happening, how are people responding, what are people doing in the world at this time, because I've had to go back and relearn my own history, because yeah, I lived 2013, but if you ask me about it, I'll be I don't really remember much because I was in college still. Mm-hmm. I have to look back at natural events. I got to look back at politics. I got to look back at all that jazz. I had to make sure that cell phones, that I was writing cell phones accurately. Because I had a flip phone back. Well, I had a Droid, but I had to remember how much internet could I do on my phone at that time? Could Rick get a notification on the BBC app to check the news to see if these are things that I have to think about. Mm-hmm. Which also just reminded me, I forgot there's another huge influence on this show, on this story, that's not just Godzilla the series, and that's Fringe.
Okay.
Fringe is a huge influence on tone and story direction. I love Fringe. I think it's a very underrated show. I mean, it was a huge success when it was on, but I absolutely adore Fringe.
Mm-hmm.
So, so far, who is your favorite monster? Stegosaurus, Tyrannus, or both?
Tyrannus. That might be my Tyrannosaurus Rex bias, or my Godzilla bias, or my Henry bias, but
yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay. Sorry, I just got a text message, so I need to address that at some point. But you still got me and all that jazz. Anything? I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember. I watched a monster movie recently that might be really fun to talk about too, if we have the time for it. Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, there's Dune.
Dune. That is, I watched both of them very recently.
Oh, you know what is a movie that I think people don't talk about enough, and they should?
What's that?
Super 8.
Okay, yeah, Super 8. That's a fun one.
Super 8 is like I was watching it and I was like, this is what I want to do with Apex 2. Like I want stories like this in Apex, where it's people. Like, you know, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, like you need strong human characters to make monster movies good. You need to have that faith in you. You need that human connection. You just need it, because like a monster is not a monster unless there's a human involved,
right?
Because then it's just an animal or a creature or whatever. Like you need that human aspect to like look at it and go like, I don't know what this is, it's a monster. Those descriptions are said in Rick all the time. Like Rick is like, I don't believe what I'm seeing, because everything that I'm seeing shouldn't be happening, shouldn't be existing. It is a true and utter monster. And Rick, I think I even mentioned that Rick doesn't want to call it a monster either. Because like if it's a monster, it means that it's truly unknowable. And I just think that's just something that's just not explored.
Yeah, and you know, going kind of jumping back a little bit here to what you just brought up about the whole research and understanding what you're doing. So one of my projects that I've been attached to was I got to do an audio commentary track for a movie called Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo. It's a 2020 Japanese monster movie about a monster that symbolizes the COVID-19 virus.
Ooh, that's fun.
And it's a movie about dealing with trying to fight against the COVID-19 issues, trying to push past that and remember a time before COVID, in the way of a comedy film.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is the way Japan handled the COVID-19 pandemic is completely different from how the United States handled the COVID-19 pandemic. So for me, even though like that's not a creative process, that's more of a intellectual like project. I went and I like dug through a ton of articles. I read every news headline that NHK posted from December of 2019 to like August of 2021.
Yeah.
That had COVID-19 in the title, which is like 100,000 articles that I read. And I like I went on different government websites and read how they like handled, you know, what lockdown was like, what was social distancing, how was the mask mandates, what was their capacity mandates. And I like I immersed myself in understanding how the Japanese handled that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I was in Korea when the MERS epidemic happened. And so that's why, like, when everything was going down here, I'm like, oh, we're going to go into lockdown for like a week and then it's going to go away because, like, that's what you do. But I never realized America never really, like, did that before. Because that's just, like, normal. That's what you do. Like, that's, like, I eventually had to get a therapist because I was having such panic attacks because I was like, I don't understand what's happening. Because, like, I have been through this before and we are not reacting the way we should be reacting. Like that week with the MERS epidemic was crazy in Korea. And I used to make fun of it, but now I look back on it, I'm like, you know what? I made fun of it because I had never been in that experience before, but I knew I was safe, and it was crazy being in the States, seeing all the signs of like, oh, this is what we should be doing, and then like 3 weeks in, and I'm like, why are we not doing the thing that we should have been doing the whole time? Like, what's with all the toilet paper thing? Because like that's, and I brought that up to someone, and they're like, I completely forgot about the toilet paper, and I was listening to the Congo episode recently, and I forgot about the murder hornets. Like, America focused on such weird stuff that wasn't the problem. That was occurring.
No, and for like a retrospective outlook too, that stuff's really weird because like I watched them go from doing a great job to what are we doing? Why the numbers are going up and it's obvious what we're doing wrong. Why are we doing it?
Yeah,
and it's a weird thing to do, like doing, going in, looking back at history and reading so much and learning so you know what you're talking about or writing about. And it just leads to such an interesting outlook. Like trying to look at it from both now and then. It's almost it's really weird, and it's really enlightening to everything that went on and how it ended up working out.
It is that, because like I try to explore that with Apex, because like I mentioned earlier, like it's not right away, but it's not until people start seeing these monsters that people start believing in these monsters, even though like there's nothing to believe in. They're real, they're happening, like they're on the news and all that jazz. But like there are people who think that Singapore was a stunt. Like there are people who thought it was a promotion for a movie, and like there'll be dialogue where it's like, well, my cousin was there, and like I haven't heard from them in weeks. Like I think it actually happened. Like we're going to their funeral next week. And like that's like when people said, and it's similar to like, and it scared me because like I've always was going to write it, but then living through the lockdowns, and it's like I didn't know anybody who died from COVID-19, but I know of people who died of COVID-19, and like that's a reality. But there are people who are like, well, I didn't know anyone who died. I mean, I had COVID and I thought I was going to die. I've never been that sick in my entire life. But I talked to people about it, and they're like, oh, I got it and I just got a cough. I'm like, well, I got it and I nearly died. Like, and I had my vaccines. Like, I can't imagine what it would have been like without my vaccines. And it's just so crazy how political it got. And that's something that's like daunting, because like in Apex, I'm like, do I want to be that real? Like here I am saying like, oh, I killed kids in the first story of Apex because like kids are frail and fragile and these monsters are giant and rocks hurt, but debris hurts. But then I'm like, do I really want to capture humans to be like, when I eventually write this bar scene, setting up how people are reacting to these monsters existing? How is that going to really be said? And like, how believable do I want to make it? Because it's like, a perfect example of something that happened to me today. I don't know about the weather in your area, but like, it's spring, but it's getting colder again. And people are like, I can't believe it's getting so cold. I'm like, yeah, it's weird. It's like, everything's fine and we've done nothing to the environment and like everything's okay. Like, we're just buckling down. And I said that to the guy today, and he was like, oh, I was just complaining about the temperature, but now I'm thinking about everything now and I just don't want to. And we laughed about it because like that's what we're doing. It's like we are aware that climate change is happening all around us. We are aware that there are things happening in the world that are affecting us all around. And we just buckle down and keeping up with the norm. Like I didn't eat meat for a while because the fact that like the Amazon's on fire because of cattle ranching and all that jazz. And like it's those small things that add up and build up. And I just like think about Apex, and I'm like, these monsters existing would cause so much trouble. Like, I remember someone at my job, a guest at my job, recently complained about the pricing of the food that we were serving. And I was explaining to them, like, well, food prices are going up, so our prices are going up. And they're like, yeah, but that's what they're just saying. Like, that's not actually happening. And I'm like, my grocery bills are expensive. I can't buy 4 things without it getting it to at least $30,
Right.
Or higher. Like, it is crazy how much the cost of food is going up, and it's showing that there's scarcity and there's problems and there's food issues, and it's all this stuff. And you still get people who are like thinking like, oh, that's just what the news is saying, but it's not the reality of it. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, we're at the grocery store. Like, people can't afford groceries. Like, it's a whole thing. And like, it's one of the reasons why I love the giant monster genre, because it's good giant monster movies have always been talking about, like, Gamera versus Gamera Guard of the Universe brought up the fact that the stock exchange closed for a day and it messed up the Japanese economy. Like, Singapore gets destroyed and it really struggles. It's not until eventually it goes into apex organism tourism. Because like, a fun thing that I do is Sparker prawns become like a Singapore staple food. Because people start raising them, and like, it turns out they have like a delicious sour taste, like an already lemoned up shrimp.
Mm-hmm.
So like, it becomes a delicacy, and it's like a local delicacy, but then it starts going international, and it causes more problems, because then you're growing this like animal that shouldn't really exist. So it's just an interesting time of the world that we're currently living in. Sorry for going through a tangent.
No, you're fine. Hi, Jane. It's good to see you in the chat. Yeah, no, I wholeheartily agree with that. And one of the things that I think many people appreciate about the genre, it's big dumb monster movie, right? But there's more, right? Like, it's more than just, oh, it's a big dumb monster movie. There's thought put in, there's research put in, there's consideration. And we've seen such amazing films that have so much to say. And some of it is up to interpretation too, death of the author, that kind of theory. That all of that is such a great thing. And you brought it up how, for me, Henry, I have yet to get COVID. I don't know what it's like to have COVID yet.
It's not fun.
But that, for me, that's a different perspective than yours. And so when you see something related to COVID, you'll view it differently and interpret it differently. And that's so interesting. And that can create such an interesting outlook on an art piece or interpretation or analysis that, I might not be able to have because I didn't go through that, right? And that's such an amazing thing about art. And I think that if your art can have that, then you've accomplished something. You've made something timeless.
And that's the goal. Like I said, it's the Jurassic Park effect. You do not have to like dinosaurs to love Jurassic Park. I know people who know nothing about dinosaurs, but that's like one of their favorite movies of all time. And I just think it's very flattering to hear that, like, you read Apex and you're enjoying it, and I like, I'm getting all this feedback. So it's like one of those things where I'm like, I must be doing something right. Like, my mad ramblings about how this story is good is showing that, like, because like there are some people who, like, my friend who read it really enjoyed it, but has actually complained that there's too much dialogue in the story. And like, I asked another friend, like, do you think that? And they're like, I just finished reading and I never thought that what's it called, that there was too much dialogue. So I'm like, oh great, that's like conflicting, because one person saying it's too much dialogue and another person saying it's the right amount of dialogue. And I just have to decide whether or not, because like at the end of the day, I'm the author, so like what I says goes, and it's up to. I went to liberal arts college, And the biggest thing they taught us is if you and I look at something and have different opinions about it, then it's art. But if it has the universal, like, that's why you can say, and like in theory, then everything turns into art, because like you could say tree and I could say like life, and you could say green and I could say vegetables, like, you know, all those thought processes, and like that's how you know it's art. So I just take that as a very flattering thing, and this conversation is like really good. This is a very interesting conversation. 110%.
I'm glad. You know, that's a part of the title that's right up here.
Yeah,
it says conversation, so hopefully it's a conversation.
well, you know, I'm still flattered about like the Cryptid Genius title of this episode, because I think about Looney Tunes, about I don't know if you know this, but you know there are episodes of Wile E. Coyote talking, right?
Yes.
So it's like it's when he's with Bugs. It's when he's with Bugs Bunny. But one of my favorite things is he's like, I'm Wile E. Coyote, genius. But there's like one part where I just absolutely love the voice, how he says it, where he's like, Wile E. Coyote, super genius. And he's like, oh, that's a nice ring to it. Super genius. Wile E. Coyote, super genius. And I saw that and I sent it to my friend. And I was like, Henry Winston, cryptid genius. Oh, what a, I had nothing to do with it. And I was like, and then I thought that they're being like, Elijah must have really liked Apex if he's calling me a genius for it. Just because, like, and again, that's like, I think that's what you said that is like really, really nice to hear in your readings of Tyrannus coming out of the bay and Stegros coming out of the mountain, which is that they feel fresh. And that's like that's my goal, is that I want you to go like, oh yeah, like the classic, but I want you to look at it like, oh, that's a fresh way to do it. Like I haven't, like that is a way that I find, I guess not comfortable is the word, but like it's the way of the movie, of the story that like it's exciting, like it's new, like it's not like, you know, oh man, like, you know, oh, I've seen this before, like I know Godzilla's coming out. It's like in -1 when we see the Odo Island Godzilla for the first time. Godzilla's never had an entrance like that. And that like keeps you going, because you know Godzilla's coming. Like you hear the footsteps, you hear the roar. We have seen and done that millions of times, but we've never seen Godzilla like come out of the darkness and rip, you know, go at a tower like that. Same thing with you know, when we see -1 coming out of the water and stuff, like we've never really seen Godzilla attack a boat like that. So it's just one of those things where I feel like people don't realize how difficult it can be to try and showcase these creatures in ways that are like fresh and like just working, you know?
Right.
So it's, you know, like I said, it's a whole thing.
And I think I like that you bring that up, because one of the things I've heard a criticism for -1 is a lack of freshness. It does fall to the Godzilla formula, right? It hits all those steps for a solo monster movie, what they do, where it ends up, right? But the thing to think about is -1 does have those moments of fresh concepts blended in with the plot in the Godzilla-isms we all know and love. You know, there's
the Godzilla bingo card is like filled all the way. Like I love, like, you know, I always say at the end of every viewing of -1, Godzilla will return one day, because like that's such a classic trope. of like Godzilla will return. Like that's the hubris of man. So I try to tackle those kind of tropes in Apex in ways like, like I said, didn't mean to do it on purpose, but I love the fact that like one could view Tyrannus and Stegoros being a double event as a reference to Godzilla Raids Again. I love the fact that like there's actually a singular point Easter egg in Apex Rising, which is Rick's tattoo. What is not forgotten need not be remembered, because that is what they say when they introduce Godzilla, the Godzilla skeleton in the first episode of Rising. But I used it as a tattoo because Rick is trans and has had top surgery, and that tattoo covers Rick's scars. So it's like, and it's a lotus flower, which reminds Rick of their mother. And it's just one of those things that I think plays, because like, a normal person's not going to think of this like obscure line from Godzilla Singular Point, but I've like incorporated that DNA into the story in a fresh way. So it's not like, I know it's from Singular Point, but like the audience doesn't know it's from Singular Point and thinks that's a really neat way of how Rick embraces their identity. Because that was a huge thing, like making Rick, because originally in all the drafts, Rick was a guy, but then I was like, I don't really like that Rick is this like white guy who knows everything, because that's just so overdone. And since I am in the trans umbrella and all that jazz, I wanted to make a queer character. I wanted Rick to become more of like my way of exploring my own stuff. So I was like, you know what? That's it. Because the thing that I cannot stand is like when the scientist character comes up and says like, oh, we should listen to me because I know about the monsters. And I'm like, you know what? You should listen to that person because they do know about the monsters and all that jazz. But making Rick trans makes it harder for Rick to be heard, because people are going to automatically have those pre-notions about Rick's identity over what Rick is saying. And that's a whole reason why Rick in the detention center, well, not the detention center, but in the holding cell at the airport is so intense, because it's actually illegal to be trans in Singapore. Like queer rights in Singapore are very like hot. It's a hot topic right now, especially in 2013. So like, that's why there's a line where like, they didn't arrest you because of that, right? Like, that's not why they arrested you. And like it causes tension for Rick, especially when Rick starts getting more and more involved. It will cause tension because there will be people with their biases who don't want to listen to the queer kid, because they just can't get over it, because that's real. And that's just something that I explore with these human characters. It's like, there are going to be like, you see it with you see it in the classroom scene where it's clear that she knows what she's talking about, but the college professor is like denying her of like her knowledge. And I just, because like Sophie's based off of real experience I had in college, where I had a professor. I was talking about the pyramids, and I was talking about like how, it's such a great human achievement. And I had a professor literally say, I didn't believe that you were going to say that to me. And I was like, what do you mean? And I was like, Henry, I literally thought you thought the pyramids were built by aliens. And I was like, I have not ever talked about that in class. Like, I've never brought that notion up and all that jazz. Like, and it made me realize like this professor has always thought of me as a weird kid. So they treated me like a weird kid and put me in that box, and people do that. And I think in a world of monsters, you're going to be put in that box a lot harder. And that's why I think the Sophie sequence is so important, because it is a woman in archaeology. And like the women I know in archaeology, it's a man's world. It's tough. It's tough to be heard when, most archaeology books are written by men and all that jazz. So I just think it's really important that that kind of awareness and inclusivity is done in Apex, because it's not done in other Giant Monsters series for sure. Like, no one in the Monsterverse is a racist or a sexist, you know?
Right.
No, and like I understand that it is a day and age where like you can't really have, like, you know, some would argue like, oh, everything's so PC that they just avoid that kind of stuff. But like, you do need those tensions. You need those issues, because like that's the reality of the world. Everybody has, it's a horrible reality, but like, you know, I think at the end of the day, as depressing as it is, I think at the end of the day, everybody's going to stick to their guns with what they believe in, because, you know, the idea of something getting out of the water at the size of Tyrannus and not dying, and then standing up and not dying is impossible. So you got to believe in what you believe in.
That's like a quote to be on a t-shirt.
Maybe. Believe in what you got to believe in. I mean, there are some things you should not believe in because it's bad. It's bad.
That's fair. Yeah.
There are some, you know, don't believe in killing people is right. Like, you know, I always have to, it's like, you know, all opinions are valid unless you're a Nazi. You know, it's that kind of like, I hate the fact that I have to put that like asterisk in conversations sometimes, because that's the world we live in. So,
well, Henry, we're about 13 minutes away from. Actually, hold on.
Oh, is that Michael?
We have Michael on the Monsters with Attitude account.
Yeah,
on X. So, hi, Michael. Welcome to the stream.
To the end of the stream.
To the end of the stream. So we have 13 minutes before you can beat my last episode's runtime. Do you want to try and beat it?
Let me think. How do you feel about the animals that are living on Stegoros and Tyrannus?
Okay, let me ask you a question. Is that influenced by the parasites from Clover?
You know, you would think, but I thought about it. Whales are covered in barnacles. There are tons of animals living on whales.
Mm-hmm.
There are tons of animals living on things. Like, so there is going to be a story later on called Stegoros Rodeo, which is actually somewhat inspired by the IDW comic where they climbed Godzilla, because I thought that was such a cool concept. And so Stegoros has those like feathers between the plates. And like, obviously Stegoros's plates have pterodactyls living on them. Because like oxpeckers. There's an animal that has not been revealed yet that lives on Stegoros, which is called a trilotic. They're like trilobite looking ticks. But Stegoros has like an ecosystem on the back. Like water gets collected in the grooves of the scutes and scales. So like there's drinking water. There's like the feathers provide like algae and stuff. You could, in theory, live on Stegoros. And like I really can't wait to write this sequence where they're climbing Stegoros and they get to the plates and they're like exploring the Stegoros forest and all that jazz. And they find a bear. Because it turns out like when Stegoros goes to sleep, animals are starting to climb Stegoros thinking it's a mountain and like finding a home and a habitat on Stegoros. And like Stegoros gets a nickname as like the world's largest moving national park. Because that's what stopped Stegoros from getting attacked by the American military, is that they eventually like kind of realized that Stegoros would count as a national park. So it's like this really funny thing. And like I explore all these loopholes because like there's a monster called Maris who's a giant elephant seal. Maris appears in Alaska first, but then travels down south to San Diego. And they're about to attack, but then they realize they can't attack because Mars is actually roosting in a national park. Because at the end of the day, Mars is an elephant seal following mating rights. So Mars is actually just doing what Mars is doing. Like Mars is just being an elephant seal. So there's a lot of like interesting aspects, but like I said earlier, like the stegodactyls start flocking into different areas. The trilatics start being discovered, like as bombshells and stuff, like pick them off. As I also mentioned, the sparker prawns soon become eaten. The amobites start actually becoming a problem because they start attaching themselves to whales, which is bad because they're big and heavy and kill whales. So that's a problem. But a lot of animals. So, and that also explores something that I guess I could talk about a little bit is there are apex organisms, but then there are apex species. And these are creatures that they're not apex organism sized, but they are animals that have that qualify in these ecosystems. So like there are like small versions of them too. Because that's just something that I think like, and that was partly inspired by Skull Island. Just because I was like, I like that the skewer buffalo is not a giant monster size. I like the fact that we got skull crawlers that were not like Kong sized all the time. Like I like that there were animals on the island that were not always big. Like they were big for what they were, but they're not like giant monster size. And I think that's something that I really want to play around with because like you'll get a monster called a rasa, which is a giant olm. But a rasa is like the female specimen, which is a giant monster size. But then there are male specimens called tazelworms, and they're like 20 feet long. Like they're still big, but they're 20 feet long, and like they got little legs. So they stand up like 3 feet tall, like on their little legs. So like they're long, but they're not tall. And I just think that just makes them really more interesting. Like get ready for the stalactite and stalagmite snails. They're super fun. So that's just something that I wanted to do is like, not only would these monsters be big, but I think they would just make the world even bigger. How many more minutes till we beat your record?
We are at, let's see, I think it's about 7 minutes. Now, we could, in theory, go into the shameless self-promotion stuff. And
I do need to talk about Kaiju Brooklyn.
Yes.
So Kaiju Brooklyn is a convention that is happening in Brooklyn, New York. There is a VIP event where like Subaraya and Mill Creek Entertainment are going to be there. It's going to be this really big party. They're going to play Mega Monster Battle Ultra Galaxy, which I can't wait because that's one of my favorite films. And there's going to be a lot of free merch at the VIP event, so I highly recommend getting your tickets at kaijubrooklyn.com. I do believe that's the website. If not, go on Instagram to look up Kaiju Brooklyn 2. And then it's a one-day con, but there's a lot of really cool people. Like Dope Pope's going to be there. Zorno, if you're familiar with that artist, is going to be there. There's going to be cosplay contests. Like I mentioned, my former co-host Lily is going to be there. So like if you really were a fan if it came from a monster movie and you want like autographs from the two hosts, you could definitely do that with us. Lily, sorry, not sorry. One of the things that I cannot wait for is the fact that they're doing a 40th anniversary screening of The Return of Godzilla, which was my first Godzilla movie. Well, Godzilla 1985 was my first Godzilla movie, but you get the gist. So that movie has a near and dear to me. Kaiju United apparently just got announced that they're going to have a panel there. There's a lot of really cool things going on at Kaiju Brooklyn, and I definitely think more people need to be aware because, like, I know you are going to G-Fest, but G-Fest has such a turbulent history right now. Just with how it's being handled and them getting rid of Artist Alley and some of their stuff not really being above board. But like, there's going to be a lot of cool artists at Kaiju Brooklyn. There's going to be a lot of cool events. It's a one-day thing. If you don't go to the VIP event, it's affordable. You'll get to meet people from all walks of the community there, and I think it's going to be the next big monster convention, because it's more accessible. I mean, not the fact that its location is Brooklyn is accessible. I'm saying, like, from what I'm hearing, you do not have to be a giant monster fan to enjoy Kaiju Brooklyn. In fact, this might be how you get to become a fan of giant monsters. And I think that's just something that's really interesting. So, like, I highly recommend anybody who's watching to go get your tickets. Like, they're always doing special promotions. Like, and again, May 31st is the VIP party and screening of Mega Monster Battle Ultra Galaxy, which is at 8 p.m. And then there will be an all-day convention on Saturday, June 1st. And then at 8 p.m., they're going to be screening Godzilla, The Return of Godzilla, which is by far one of the best Godzilla films I watched. Because I don't... Elijah, have you watched the Godzilla films chronologically?
Oh, yeah.
It's a weird trip. It's a weird trip when you watch them chronologically, because you start realizing the patterns, I realized Godzilla vs. Gigan is not a good movie, but I realized Godzilla vs. Megalon might be one of my favorite Showa era films of all time.
I like that.
Which shocked me. I am thoroughly shocked because here I'll read this off my letterbox, because right now I can't do everything because I haven't watched Godzilla X Kong yet, so we don't know where that lines up with the franchise. But right now, my top 10 favorite Godzilla movies. Actually, I'll do top 20 so we can make sure to do the 13. Number 1, hold on, because I want to see your face when I read these off.
Oh boy.
So number 1 is Godzilla -1, is my number 1 favorite Godzilla movie. Okay. Number 2 is Godzilla 54. Number 3 is Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 1974, because it's my favorite. I love that film. Number 4 is Godzilla the Planet Eater. Number 5 is Godzilla 1985. Number 6 is Godzilla vs. Hedorah. Number 7 is Godzilla vs. Destroya. Number 8 is Mothra vs. Godzilla. Number 9 is Godzilla the Monster Planet. Number 10 is Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. Number 11 is Godzilla 2000. Number 12 is The Return of Godzilla, because they are very different films, 85 and Return. Ghidorah the three-headed monster is number 13. Godzilla Sitting on the Edge of Battle is number 14 as one of my best Godzilla movies. King Kong vs. Godzilla, the original Japanese cut, is number 15. Number 16 is Godzilla vs. Megalon. Number 17 is Godzilla King of the Monsters from 1956. Number 18 is Godzilla vs. Kong. Number 19 is All Monsters Attack, because Godzilla's Revenge is a good movie. I will die by that. And then number 20 is by far one of the better Godzilla films, which is Godzilla 98.
Huh.
Yep. Talk about human characters. That movie works. That's going to be Matthew Broderick's grave tombstone. The one where the Matthew Broderick Godzilla. But I was shocked. I was shook. But I'm curious to see. I am so curious to see where dumb movie Godzilla X Kong New Empire is going to go, because I actually have a poster of it in my office. I have the first original poster of it, which I love because it's the first time the Holy Trinity is seen in official Godzilla merchandise. Because you've got the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, because Jesus Christ is on that poster. First time you've ever seen Godzilla and Jesus in the same picture. Officially in the same promotional material. It's Godzilla and our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And I think that's hilarious. So we're at 214. We beat it.
Yes, we have beaten it. I'm trying to find it. I don't have my full ranking because I've been rewatching the films. But this is the current hold on. Okay, yeah. So this is the current ranking of 54 through Destroy All Monsters plus minus 1. Which the next podcast episode for Kaiju Conversation will officially rank Godzilla Kong the New Empire in this ranking. Which would that be 10? No, this would be 11. So I'll have 11 films. It's currently 10.
All right.
So at the top of my list, so this is best to worst, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster.
Nice. That's a solid one.
Followed by Godzilla minus 1.
Yep.
Followed by Godzilla 1954.
Yep.
Followed by Invasion of Astro Monster.
That's a choice.
Followed by King Kong versus Godzilla.
The original Japanese version, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. Followed by Son of Godzilla.
Good.
Followed by Ibra, Horror of the Deep.
Good.
Followed by Destroy All Monsters.
Nice.
Followed by Mothra versus Godzilla.
That's one of my all-time favorites.
And then ending the list is Godzilla Raids Again.
You know what? That movie is underrated. I just realized that list was from best to worst, and I'm like, Godzilla Raids Again was an underrated film. Also, Invasion. I don't know if you know this about me, but I hate Invasion of the Astro Monster. I cannot stand it. I don't think it's good. I think it's really boring. What did I rated it? Oh, how did I? What was my review of it? I gave it 2.5 stars, and I wrote, in theory, I should like this movie. It has some of my favorite actors in the Showa era, monsters, plot lines, and a rad special effects as well as alien romantics. But while all the pieces are there, I am one of the few Godzilla/Daikaiju fans that I know that just do not vibe with this movie, and no amount of Godzilla dancing can fix that. I respect what this film does for the franchise as a whole, but for me, Invasion of the Astro Monster is a film I always struggle to connect and engage with, and while I recognize its potential for its acclaim, I sadly cannot enjoy this film. Maybe because this film starts a trend of lackey Ghidorah, and at times feels like this narrative is forced to feature Godzilla and Rodan, and makes this otherwise interesting alien invasion flick a monster movie.
Huh. Interesting. I don't know how to react to that.
You can think about it. That could be one of your questions when I come back for the bonus episode.
But I will say I fully expect Godzilla Kong the New Empire to be like bottom 5.
Watch us like it.
I know. I've said that. Like, a lot of people think that I'm gonna hate it. I would like to not hate it. And I'm curious, like, what if I go in and I actually like it? Like, that would be the biggest, like, bamboozle ever.
I think the problem is this movie's going to be very much Godzilla versus Megalon, and I don't...
Without the charm or the subtleties of the Showa era.
Here's the thing. It could be. It really... It in theory... could be a very good Showa era movie, and I don't know how I feel about it. But at least we beat your record with my travesty.
So, with that, I guess we can wrap things up here. Just a little shy of 2.5 hours. This is pretty decent. It didn't beat the all-time record. But the all-time record, I don't see anybody ever beating because it was 7 hours and 20 minutes.
Oh, I think you've told me about this episode, and that's wild.
That was Danny and I's Godzilla -1 discussion where we just talked about the movie. That might be I have probably talked about -1 for over 48 hours.
I mean,
Like
you saw it 30 times.
I saw it 30 times.
Must be nice.
I've been on 4 shows to talk about it, I think.
Well, for those who are watching, if you have a show and you want a fun guest, I'm back. I am available for all shows in case you want the chaos, because I'm funny. As many of you know, I was the best episode of Monsters vs. Men because I compared Gamera vs. Zegra to Jaws and succeeded in comparing Gamera vs. Zegra to Jaws and why they're both great films. Because that's my favorite Gamera movie. My all-time favorite.
Well, speaking of which, Henry, is there any plugs you'd like to throw in before I go on my ending spiel?
Once again, Kaiju Brooklyn is something that you guys should be at. I will be there, and I'll be hopefully having Apex available for people to purchase in some way or form. I will also note that I am debating about being more active on the old podcast Instagram of @creature features. At the moment, I can be best reached on my personal Instagram through DMs, which is the Henry42, because that is a nickname that I have grown to absolutely love. But yeah, other than that, I'm not really anywhere at the moment.
Okay. Well, then I guess I'll wrap us up here with starting with my sign off. This is not Monsters with Attitudes, so this will not be the digest version. There's a running gag that I have to make it 2 minutes or less for my spiel, but I probably won't beat that here. Because hello everybody, I am Elijah, and I have a kaiju and tokusatsu problem. Joking aside, I am Elijah Thomas. I am Elijah Thomas. I co-host the podcast Kaiju Conversation with my co-host and good friend Rex. We cover the wide world of tokusatsu and kaiju. We covered the wide world of tokusatsu, from kaiju and giant monsters to henshin heroes and J-horror. I am also a part of the rotating hosts of Monsters with Attitude. You can check us out on YouTube, where we do monthly live streams talking kaiju entertainment. You can also head over to Facebook and join our Facebook group. It's a great place to talk with like-minded people. I'm also a writer. I've written for GodzillaMovies.com and in Kaiju Ramen Magazine. Currently, I write for Kaiju United. My most recent article was about Kong, King of Exploitation, covering Kongsploitation films. And my writing has also been featured in the book Giant Bug Cinema, A Monster Kid's Guide from Bear Manor Media, where I wrote about Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Outside of writing and podcasting, I also served as a consultant on the upcoming Titanic Creations officially licensed Yongari articulated figure. More information will come out soon about that, so stay tuned. You can subscribe to emails or text message alerts from TitanicCreations.com to stay up to date with the latest news for that action figure. I've also had the privilege to produce bonus features for SRS Cinema's Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo, and even acted as an audio commentator for the film. You can order the Blu-ray on srscinema.com. I'm also a filmmaker and YouTuber. You can check out my stuff on my YouTube channel, ET13 Productions, where you can see some of my short films and older YouTube videos, along with a playlist that features my ever-growing list of appearances on YouTube. I do plan on eventually getting new videos out there and my other short films that have went unreleased, so definitely stay tuned for that. I've also appeared in a kaiju movie, a little-known film called Zillafoot from 2021.
You were in Zillafoot?
I was in Zillafoot. I made a brief cameo in the film as Skywatcher number 2. It's got a rating of 3.7 out of 10 on IMDb, so you know it's got to be peak cinema. So if you want to watch it, you can buy the Blu-ray on srscinema.com or the DVD from any major online retailer, or just watch it for free on Tubi with ads, or check it out on Prime. You can also check out my action figure photography on my Instagram at ET13_productions and my X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. Thanks, Danny. at the same handle. And as for the podcasts, don't forget to rate us on iTunes. That boosts our ratings and helps us get recommended to more people just like you. If you don't have an Apple device, which I don't blame you, I don't. That's a lie. I'm literally streaming on a MacBook right now, so that's a lie. But you can rate us on Spotify. If you want to stay up to date with all things Kaiju Conversation related, follow us on Twitter at KAIJU_CONVERS. If you don't have Twitter, you can follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook at the same handle. If you're like me before podcasting and you don't have any social media, lucky you. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word. You know the drill. We also have a Teespring store. It's just got a logo on it. Eventually, we'll have more cooler artwork and merchandise on there. But until then, you can sport our logo on a t-shirt or maybe even a coffee mug. You know, maybe you want to sip your morning coffee with a Kaiju Conversation mug. If you'd like to chat with us, check out our Discord server full of others that have similar interests to you. It's a great community full of great people. And for these streams especially, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you can be notified anytime we upload a video. Hopefully I said that clearly enough where it does the little like light up like subscribe and moves the bell, because YouTube does that now apparently. We sometimes post exclusives to the channel like bloopers for episodes or minisodes talking about news or other subjects. We also do these monthly live streams, Kaiju Conversation Live, where we have a guest on and we just chit-chat about anything and everything. We also have an interview with Mechagodzilla designer Jared Krzyzewski on the channel. Definitely butchered his name. I'm so sorry for that. A huge thanks to Rex for editing all of these episodes and all the other content we upload. His links can be found in the description below. Along with Rex, we'd like to give a huge thanks and shout out to DiManna of the Godzilla novelization project for his amazing vocals on our theme song. You can support him by following him on Twitter at Danzilla93_GNP or visit his website GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. And a huge thanks to Grattan Conwell from the podcast Giant Monster BS for composing the music for our theme song. You can support him by following the podcast on Twitter at Giant Monster BS or on any podcast platform under the name Giant Monster BS. And with that, we're going to wrap up this Kaiju Conversation live stream. Thank you so much, Henry. This was great conversation. I had so much fun. Thank you so much.
This was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to the bonus episode because, man, I feel like you're going to have tons of questions after you read the field guidance and read the series Bible. Maybe I'll tease some more spoilers.
But with that, we're going to wrap this up here just shy of 2 hours and 30 minutes. So thank you again, Henry. Thank you to everybody who joined in the chat and talked to us. Thank you to everybody who's listened live. And thank you to anybody and everybody that comes on after on the VOD version and watches and interacts and does all of the fun stuff. So thank you guys so much. And as always, please remember, life's too short to not talk big. Bye, guys.
Adios. Catch you on the flip.